Okay. Hello, guys. Welcome back to the briefing room. As always, am Dean. There we go. We got that worked out. So, another good issue. They've really worked out a lot of their bugs. Not all of the bugs, which we'll get into later, but they have worked out a lot of bugs in the first couple issues. So, let's go on and get into it, shall we? So, first we have... I'm sorry, guys, I'm still working on this new program, so I can't get the picture any bigger right now. Still working that out. But in this part of the in that panel, it's interesting to see how massive Mars-based Sarah was. Right? Yeah, Sarah. It was a big base. So it's interesting. They're probably not going to touch very much upon it, but it's interesting to see how big it is and then think how mysteriously everyone kind of died. I mean, there was a lot of people there. So, yeah, but anyway, so in this first page, the SDF-1 starts getting supplies. They've landed and they are starting to get the supplies from the base. And at the same time, Chiron activates his trap to snare them. Now, is it Sammy? I think it's Sammy that reports to Claudia that that they're being attacked by the Zentradi. Sorry, I'm a little out of it right now. But they report that they are being attacked by the Zentradi. Now, one little note here is, as I said, they have gotten better in both the art and the writing. For the most part, there's still every now and then some sort of issue, and this was the biggest issue I had with this particular comic. It just... The scaling seems to be a little off. And I wish there was some sort of... Later we get to see a blurring effect behind some Guardians, so to indicate that they're moving and that they've got their jets going and everything. I kind of wish they had the blurring effect under the legs of the battle pods and the officer pod, because it just kind of looks like they're just kind of walking. Like Chiron's officer pod looks like it's just standing on Mars base. It doesn't look right, at least to me. And like I said, that's the biggest problem I had with this issue. If that's the biggest problem, they're doing pretty good. But it still took me out of it for a second, just like, why? So, but anyway, so Chiron starts his attack, and Sammy indicates that they are being attacked. And Claudia realizes that they had been set up. It's a trap. It's a trap. So she realizes that it's been a trap and that they were supposed to walk into it. They walked just so anyway, the fighters get sent out to combat the Zentradi, and the Destroids are placed around the SDF-1 in order to prevent the SDF-1 from getting damaged. So they have their contingency plan in place to just in case the fighters don't work, that they have the Destroids stationed around to form a perimeter so that nothing damages the ship, so that way they can figure out how to get off the ship. And the next 2 pages are pretty much the same. I really liked this image here, which is why I put it up. And I like that image as well. One thing about this image, I wish they had some sort of indicator for, the bullets and missiles and everything. We just see a whole lot of explosions. And that's kind of unfortunate just because there's so much they could do with that. But, it happens. But I also think that this is interesting. The fact that Claudia has taken over control while Lisa's away. And I kind of mentioned it a little bit in my last discussion. We didn't see anyone take over for Captain Global in the show until, I want to say, like episode 14, I think. And it's because Captain Global was going to the United Earth government to discuss the plans to let the residents of Macross City leave the SDF-1 and to give him his report on the Zentradi and the possible proposal to negotiate with them. But in the comics here, Claudia's the 3rd person now to take over the SDF-1. So that's an average of 1 person every 2 issues, which I think is pretty fascinating. Because obviously what happened with Captain Global previously, Lisa had to take over for him permanently. And right now she's on Mars base Sarah, trying to be all Captain Kirky. And Lisa's stuck trying to run the ship in her stead. And there's all this going on. So, anyway, they try to activate the anti-gravity pods. But unfortunately, the anti-gravity pods, they are useless because they've got the gravity mines holding them back. So they've got nowhere to go right now because they have no way of going. They will tear the ship apart trying to leave. So, and the mines are buried deep enough that they can't get to them. So, about this image, and the reason I chose this image for the next page. So, a little bit about me. Way back when I was younger, like I don't even think I was in middle school yet, I started writing a book about this spy, and he was part of a secret spy organization called the Green Tigers organization, and they went. And the evil organization was the Black Lion organization. And so I find that funny because in the Sentinels novels, there is a squadron. It's just briefly mentioned in the battle. They're like, "Oh man, the Green Tiger Squadron's taking heavy losses." It's like, oh, I made that when they made it first because those novels came out, when I was very, very young. But I didn't read them until after I was out of school and married, before I actually purchased those books and read them. So I read them and I was like, I made a Green Tiger Squadron or organization. That's pretty cool. And then here they have the Black Lion Squadron. And I realized that it could just be that, the, big cats, the hunter cats are pretty cool, and colors are a pretty good way of having call signs. But I like to think that that's pretty cool. I mean, it's the exact same color and the exact same creature, and that happened twice. So it's probably just dumb luck, but I like to think that I inspired it with the book they never read. Anyway, now that all of that nonsense is over, the citizens of Macross City feel the jolt of when the SDF-1 tried lifting off and got snagged by the gravity mines. And Minmay asks, what is going on? And that's something Claudia is also trying to figure out as well. But we then get this nice little line from Chiron, and it's just kind of funny because, as I've mentioned them several times now, but there's a podcast I listen to called the Robo Skull Podcast, and they love to joke around about how Roy and Claudia in the beginning keep talking about Roy's kill count. So that's always been a joke in the podcast. Well, here, Chiron's like, hey, I need to maximize my, kill tally. And, yeah, it's, and Grell tries contacting him, and I have an image of Grell, because Grell looks totally different than he did in the show. But Grell just basically informs him that the gravity pods were working, and he's like, of course they're working. I set it up myself. But if anyone is going to care about a kill count, you know for a fact that it's going to be Chiron. Chiron is a lunatic like that. So, anyway, we get back to Lisa. And I just want to make a little bit of a note here. As I've said before, I've really been enjoying this series. It has its problems for sure. There's been some art issues mostly towards the beginning. It's kind of ironed itself out since, and a little bit of writing issues. But one thing that I keep hearing people say to me is that characters don't show emotion very well. Now you look at that image right there of Lisa trying to cope with seeing her former fiance, who she thought was leaving her because he didn't love her anymore, basically, and all those emotions that come with all of that. And you tell me there's no emotion in that face right there in that image while she's dealing with all of that. There's emotion is tough to picture, but at the same time, they really didn't have any emotion towards the beginning, worth really focusing on. Yeah, there were times they were supposed to look mad and didn't look as mad as they could have been, or surprised, and I personally didn't have any problem with Minmei's surprised face, but a lot of people thought it was kind of derpy looking. I didn't personally have a problem with it, but it's clear that he can show emotion. It's just he hasn't needed to with his art up to this point. Anyway, Claudia's trying to contact Lisa, but for some reason Lisa's not responding. And as I said, Lisa's trying to cope with the fact that she's currently seeing Carl, her long-lost fiancé, in what almost appears to be a spirit form. And she said, everyone here is supposed to be dead. I don't believe in ghosts. And Carl just simply points, and she's like, look, I didn't mean what I said all those years ago. I was angry that you were leaving, She's trying to get the closure that she was searching for, to this apparition, so to speak. And he just simply points and starts walking in the direction he pointed. So she ends up having to follow him. So, as far as this ghost thing, I'm not sure what to think about it. I just mentioned RoboSkull podcast. They discussed this issue, and they were theorizing that maybe it's a hologram rather than a ghost, which I'm not ruling that out, but there's an image I have later on that that makes me think that it's not merely a hologram. Again, I'm not ruling it out, but I don't necessarily think that's it. And they've, all throughout all the time that they were hyping up the comic before they actually released anything, they said they were going to draw inspiration from multiple sources that told Robotech stories. And one thing that I found is it's interesting they chose this because in the novels, spoiler for the novels, by the way, in the novels they have like this almost spiritual, mystical type storyline going on with the main story. And so it wouldn't surprise me if they kind of drew inspiration from the novels for this moment, and it actually is a ghost, for lack of a better term, a spirit or something along those lines. It would not surprise me just because of some of the mystic mumbo jumbo that they had in the novels. So, going back to emotional scenes, they call for all available pilots to join them in the, join the, launch and fight off the attacking Zentradi. And Rick leaves to go fight. Minmay tries to stop him, saying, "Look, you're not cleared to fly yet. Your eyes are still a problem. You're going to get yourself killed. You're going to get other people killed." And Rick kind of just ignores her and kind of walks off, saying, "You know what? I have a plan for this. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to miss your birthday." And then some woman, I'm thinking it might be the comics version of her Aunt Lena, walks up and basically tells her that she needs to, tell him. But I've been saying throughout this comic series that I feel like the Rick and Minmay relationship is much more realistic, much more healthy in these comics than they really were in the show. Because in the show, neither of them ever thought of each other. Neither of them, as far as what they wanted. It was always selfish reasoning. It was always Minmay wanted Rick to be carrying her bags for her while she went shopping. It was always Rick wanted her to, give up her career for him, and that later she wanted Rick to give up his career for her. It was never, what does this person want? It was always, what do I want from this person? Whereas in this comic series, it is a much healthier relationship. They both think about each other as far as Minmay asks him what's wrong. She would have never asked Rick what was wrong before. She was always oblivious to his problems, whether or not they were self-induced or not. She was always oblivious to them. So I've always said this is a much better relationship. This is, if in this comic series Rick and Minmay end up together at the end, I would have no problem with it, just because it's not selfish like it was in the show. That being said, Rick is definitely being very selfish here. Is not necessarily in the fact that he is thinking about other people, but he's not thinking about other people because, as she said, she doesn't know his plan. She doesn't know that he had Lang make him special visor for his eyes. And he doesn't tell her that. He just kind of walks off to do his own thing. So he's not thinking about her because he's not telling her what his plan is. He's just leaving saying, "I'm going to do my own thing." And he's also not thinking just because, what if that visor doesn't work? He hasn't tested the visor yet. What if he does end up hurting himself or others? So Rick is being very selfish here. It ends up working all for the best, but that's kind of besides the point, isn't it? But I think that was kind of interesting. And here I included this image because that's kind of what we're all thinking about the show right now. It's like we have more questions in this show, or in this comic series, than we ever did in the show. But anyway, he walks through a door that needs a command key to open it, and she uses Captain Global's command key to open the door. Weird thing is, it kind of shows Captain Global's face. I'm not sure if that was the computer showing the face of the person the command ID belonged to, or whether it was just her thinking about him, because it kind of shows that later, so I'm not sure what all that's about. But she opens up the door, and that's the interaction. She's like, I came here looking for answers, but I only have more questions. And then she continues to follow him. But then she finally gets a hold of Claudia, informs Claudia that it's been a communication blackout. There's been some sort of reasoning for why her communications haven't gotten through, why Claudia's communications haven't gotten through. And it's so Claudia's giving her the rundown. They're being attacked. There's gravity mines keeping the ship from leaving. The situation's not good, and Claudia says, we need a miracle. And so here she's at a computer desk searching at different things, and she found something interesting, and she goes, a miracle, huh? And then we get Rick launching in the next page, and he I have this image up because I just want to point out that every time we see the SDF-1 in this comic, the SDF-1 always looks so good. I just want to give credit where credit is due to Marco Torrini. The SDF-1, no matter what, always looks fantastic. I am very impressed. Not sure about the jet flames going that far back, especially after earlier when they just used a blurring effect rather than having fire showing that the jets are moving. But the SDF-1 always looks fantastic, and I gotta give credit where credit is due there. But anyway, as I mentioned before, Rick goes to his plane, asks if it's ready. They're like, oh yeah, the engines have been warming up for you. And then he asks Lang, hey, have you made those modifications yet? Like, is it ready? And Lang's like, yeah, your visor is ready for your special eyes. And so he's like, all right, and he takes off. Now, I would have liked to have seen, Lang's tests. I'm sure we'll get some sort of flashback or something like that later on. I would have loved to see Lang's tests on that, because the eye doctor was like, hey, yeah, your eyes are mutating, they're changing, they're perfect. And you're going to have to talk to Dr. Lang. This is out of my realm of knowledge. This is definitely Lang's realm of knowledge. So, anyway, Dr. Lang has the visor, and Rick takes off to join the fight. And Roy asks Claudia what's going on with the whole SDF situation, because he's been following it pretty thoroughly. And so he asks her what's going on. And she tells him that Lisa has a plan. And one thing to note here is that she says that Lisa's discovered things on Mars Base Sarah that they don't even have a name yet for. And it's like, okay, what do you mean you don't have a name for that? What's the deal here? So there's definitely some sort of mystery going on with Mars Base Sarah. And I hope we get more about that. I hope they don't just kind of leave it. But there's something that was going on there that they don't even understand. And on top of that, she's not only says that there's things they don't even have a name for on Mars Base Sarah. She also says that there is a reflex furnace we didn't even know existed up here. There was a reflex furnace up there, and no one even knew. And so the plan is to blow up the reflex furnace and destroying all the enemies and the gravity pods. That way they can make their escape. And she tells Roy simply, hey, the captain's plans is lead the enemies to the captain and she'll blow them all up. And Roy's like, I like her. Of course he would, you know? But, so here we have an interesting image, and it's Chiron fighting with Roy. Now, this is something we never got in the show, which baffles my mind, because at the time Chiron was first introduced, Roy was the pilot. Rick still hadn't made much of a name for himself yet, and and Max was not even introduced yet. So at this point, he was when Rick was facing off against Chiron, but we never got a Roy versus Chiron fight, which I didn't even think about until this comic. When I saw this panel and Chiron's like, "You're testing my resolve." Yeah, I never realized that Roy and Chiron never fought. What would that have been like? Well, this is the perfect opportunity for the comics, as you can see, to take up that question. Clearly, Roy irritates Chiron to no end. But on Britai's ship, Britai asks what's going on Mars. Next door's like, we got the same dismissive message from Chiron that we've got the last couple times we've asked for a report. And so Britai's like, what are the long-range scans showing? Next door says, Chiron's violated our orders and is using gravity mines to keep the SDF-1 in check. And then Britai slams the window of his office / control room, or whatever you want to call it. He smashes his fist into the wall there in anger of Chiron disobeying his direct orders. But I think I've said this before. I think Britai's a lot more interesting here than he ever was in the show. I mean, he was a fascinating character in the show, but here there's a few more layers to him. One, he's a lot angrier than he was in the show. He's also more philosophical. He likes to do a deep dive into the psyche of these aliens he barely knows. much more than Ritai of the show did. And that's just an interesting dynamic to me, that he's not as cool-headed, but he's also, even though he's angrier, he is also more philosophical in a way. I think that's an interesting dynamic to include. So here's the picture of Grell that I was referring to. He looks totally different than he did in the show. In the show, he kind of had the spiky front, and he's got much more of a smooth, like almost James Bond-esque hairstyle going on. But anyway, he and Chiron have a small interaction about how things are proceeding. And Chiron flat out tells him, hey, I'm not going to let up. That's what a normal person would do. But I want to make each one of them feel pain, basically. He's like, I'm not settling for letting them retreat and lick their wounds. They are going to suffer because I'm the one leading this. We also get more Lisa. Lisa just activated the reflex furnaces, and she's running through a hallway, and she sees Carl pointing to a door. She's like, oh, I don't have time for this. This place is about to blow up. But she ends up seeing what he's pointing at. And he's pointing at his door, which is the first indication for me personally that maybe it wasn't just a hologram, because why else would he be pointing? And then later it indicates that what he's pointing to is much more personal than, it has some more personal stuff in there. Obviously, because it is his quarters, it is his room that he stayed in the base. But anyway, Claudia says, hey, this place is about to blow up. We need someone to retrieve Lisa. And Roy's like, okay, yeah. But Rick's like, no, I'll do it. And they're like, what? What? Who? Aren't you not cleared to fly? So even they were surprised that he was flying. But anyway, he swoops down, destroys several battle pods, and they're like, oh, those are some pretty good moves there. Now, I wish this was a little bit bigger, just because this is what I'm talking. This was the main thing I was talking about why I don't think it's necessarily a hologram, is when it's smashing through the windows, it is when it's smashing through the windows, it is reacting to the Battloid smashing through the windows. It's not just static, standing there like a hologram would. It is reacting to it, which is why one of the reasons I do think it might actually be a ghost, and they might be taking some of that mysticism, spiritual stuff from the books. And then inside that little picture, there's another picture that I wanted to include, where she's looking at what he's pointing to, and you can actually see Rick in the background, and I thought that was a nice little touch, just that you can see Rick flying across the span of the window before he smashes the window. But anyway, sorry. Carl Ribber was pointing to some books inside a floorboard in his quarters. And really, Lisa's like, it's stuff about us. It was personal stuff about them. But there was a stack of some books there. And so she's trying to grab the books, but she only gets one of them. In the next panel, she only gets one of them before she's grabbed by said Rick Hunter. And she's demanding that he puts her down because she needs all that stuff. And Rick just completely ignores her, and in fact even makes a comment, I saved her. She's not happy about it, but I saved her. And then flies off as the base is exploding. Sorry about that. So, anyway, here we go. And there's the explosion of Mars base. And it is as it's blowing up that Chiron realizes why the enemy is retreating and realizes that they had a plan all along for his trap. And he basically curses them. He's like, I will make you pay. This is now personal. This is a vendetta I will keep against you. And in the meantime, on that same page, which is this page right here, on that same page, that's where he's cursing them and making a personal vendetta against them. Lisa tells Rick he's an idiot. And he's like, I'm the idiot. I just saved you. You know, you're going to blow up. But she wanted those books. She wanted that closure. But Claudia also launches the SDF-1. They all escape. Perfectly fine. Yada, yada, yada. Now, this next couple pages is strange to me. I realize they didn't have a whole lot of time. They said it's been constant attacks since Global died. But it's also been 2 weeks since Global died. So why are they just now doing a funeral? This could even be another week. Like this, it's been a very long time since he died. Why are they just now getting around to funeral proceedings for the former captain of the SDF-1? It doesn't quite make sense to me that they are just now getting to this 2 to 3 weeks after the fact. But during this funeral session, while they're talking about Captain Global and everything he's done and, you know, how much he'll be missed and all that funeral stuff, it also shows a flashback of Roy and Claudia decoding that chip that they found in the Cola bot. And right here you can see a face. And in the next frame you see Captain Global getting murdered. Like, there's something to this mystery that they were trying to solve that wasn't just, you know, there was more to it than anyone thought. Even them, they were just trying to figure out why he didn't head directly to the bridge. Well, not only did he not head directly to the bridge, he was murdered in cold blood. So what's the deal there, is the question. Now, this is something that we can definitely theorize. I have a few ideas, so I might put out a video about that at some point. But it'll be interesting to see how they proceed from here. Oh, there we go. Okay. it'll be interesting to see how they proceed from here, just because of this. They still have the flashback to finish from, them exploring the SDF-1. Now they have this whole matter to attend to, plus, the mystery of Mars base that Lisa's working on right now with the one book she got from Carl, and trying to figure out what all was there that they didn't even have a name for. There's a lot going on, and that's one of the exciting things, is there's so much going on right now outside of the main story that we already know. It's, for the most part now. I mean, they've made some changes here and there, but that's fascinating, just to think about all these extra stories going into what we would consider the main story from the show, even though, like I said, they have made some changes to that as well. So, there's the new captain finishing up her speech about, her eulogy about Captain Global, and what could happen there. And then it also shows a flashback of her using his chip, his little command ID chip that she retrieved from him, and showing a hologram of him, which it kind of closes out on as they shoot him out into space. So that's very interesting right there. And then they have the covers, which they had some pretty cool covers. They had a cover from Tommy Yoon for this issue, and I haven't seen Tommy Yoon do anything. I haven't seen him do any new images in a long time, so that's pretty darn cool. And then they have some of their reoccurring cover art as well. But all the covers were pretty good for this issue as well. But that's it. We've reached the end of the stream. I hope you enjoyed watching. I'm always open to input, so for the next stream, if you guys decide to say something, make a comment, I will be happy to look at it, discuss it with you. This is a discussion after all. It's not just me up here, it's all of you. So I'm going to go ahead and end it now. As I said before, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you keep watching, and I will see you guys next time.